The cruiser Veilthorn drifted without purpose, a wounded animal caught between stars that no longer cared whether it lived or died. Commander Kael'Ryn stood at the observation blister, hands clasped behind his back, watching a dead sun stain the viewport with dull crimson light. Its radiation bled slowly into the ship's failing shields, each pulse a reminder that time itself had turned hostile. They were alone. Truly alone. The last coalition signal had faded 3 cycles ago, cut short mid-transmission, as if the universe itself had lost interest. Officially, the system was classified as unsalvageable, too far from stable lanes, too close to enemy expansion. Unofficially, it meant the same thing it always did. No aid was coming. Kael'Ryn did not blame command. He blamed himself. Life support at 62%. Chief Engineer Tavos reported from behind him. His voice was steady, but the skin along his jaw had tightened, a tell Kael'Ryn had learned to recognize during years of shared campaigns. We can stretch it further if we shut down secondary habitat rings. How long? Kael'Ryn asked without turning. For cycles. 5 if no one complains about the cold. Someone would complain. Someone always did. Tavos knew that too, but neither of them said it aloud. Around them, the bridge bore the scars of a retreat that had turned into a rout. Burn marks crawled along the bulkheads where enemy fire had punched through before emergency seals engaged. One tactical station sat dark, its operator, Lieutenant Hesh, now wrapped in a shroud in the aft compartment, honored with silence because there were no words left that mattered. The crew numbered 37. All soldiers. All male. All exhausted. "We should abandon the ship," said First Officer Malek, rising slowly from the command pit. His armor was still on, dented and blackened, as though removing it might invite reality to settle fully onto his shoulders. "Launch the pods, scatter. It's what doctrine recommends." Kael'Ryn finally turned. Malek's eyes met his, unflinching but searching, the way a subordinate looks when he already knows the answer and hopes to be proven wrong. "Doctrine assumes rescue corridors," Kael'Ryn replied. "There are none here." "Then we die together instead of separately," Malek said quietly. A murmur passed through the bridge, not fear, but acceptance. That frightened Kael'Ryn more than panic ever could. Acceptance meant the fight was over. He stepped forward, placing one hand against the command rail. "We are not dead yet. As long as this hull holds, we maintain discipline. We survive, because that is what we do." It sounded convincing. He wished it felt convincing. The enemy had driven them here deliberately. Coalition analysts called the region a void pocket, empty, resource-poor, strategically worthless. That assumption had cost thousands of lives. The enemy had learned what the Coalition refused to accept. Emptiness made the perfect trap. Sensors chimed softly. Tavos frowned at his console. "Commander, I'm picking up residual distortions." Kael'Ryn felt a flicker of tension cut through his fatigue. "Enemy."
"No."
"Not active signatures. It's old turbulence. Deep space shear patterns." Malek leaned closer. "From what?" Tavos hesitated. "From something passing through faster than light. Recently." Silence fell again, heavier this time. "No Coalition ship could survive a jump this deep without a stabilized corridor," Malek said. "I know," Tavos replied. "That's why it doesn't make sense." Kael'Ryn's gaze returned to the viewport, to the unmoving stars. His mind sifted through intelligence briefings, half-forgotten rumors, footnotes dismissed as irrelevant. One name surfaced unbidden, spoken more often with skepticism than respect. Humans. They were technically allies, bound by signatures and ceremonial accords, but rarely seen at the front. Their ships were crewed by Coalition standards, their tactics inconsistent, their command structure disturbingly flexible. Deathworlders, the analysts called them, as if that explained everything and nothing at all. Most importantly, humans did not operate this far out. Could it be debris drift? Malek asked. Tavos shook his head.
No.
The energy profile is wrong. Violent.
Compressed.
Whatever made that wake was pushing its drive far beyond recommended tolerances. Kael'Ryn felt something stir at his chest, an emotion he did not welcome. Hope was dangerous. Hope made soldiers careless.
Log it, he said.
And return power to forward sensors. If the enemy is hunting us, I want to see them coming. Yes, Commander. As Tavos worked, Kael'Ryn straightened, forcing authority back into his posture. Around him, the bridge crew resumed their stations, hands moving with practiced efficiency. These men had followed him into ambush, into fire, into loss. He owed them more than quiet surrender. A soft alert pulsed, internal, not external. Malik glanced at the display and lowered his voice. Another casualty. Medical reports cardiac failure. Stress-induced. Kael'Ryn closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. Add his name to the record. We will remember him properly. If they lived long enough to remember anyone. The sensors stabilized, projecting a refined map of the surrounding void. Empty lanes. Scattered radiation. And beneath it all, the faintest echo of something that should not exist. Kael'Ryn stared at the data, unease curling slowly into something sharper. The universe had not answered their distress call. But somewhere out there, something had heard them anyway. The air on the Veilthorn was thick with tension, an invisible fog that clung to metal walls and bone alike. Tavos hunched over the sensor array, eyes scanning lines of raw data that refused to settle. Every new reading contradicted the last, a puzzle without a solution. Commander, Tavos said, voice clipped, the anomaly is expanding. Energy output has doubled since our last sweep. And he paused, swallowing an unspoken disbelief. It's following a trajectory consistent with an FTL jump. Kael'Ryn's jaw tightened. Impossible, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. He had spent decades in coalition service, had witnessed firsthand the most daring maneuvers, and yet this reading defied every tactical manual. No ship could maintain structural integrity at this distance without a stabilized corridor. Malik leaned forward, fingers steepled against his chest. What are you implying? Tavos didn't answer immediately. Instead, he adjusted a filter and brought up a spectral overlay. If these readings are correct, and I admit I am reluctant to believe it, it matches the signature of a human vessel. The word hung in the bridge like a sudden thunderclap. Humans. The Coalition's unpredictable, underestimated wildcards. Soldiers who had built legends out of survival, who thrived where protocols failed, who fought with a reckless stubbornness that both terrified and fascinated Coalition strategists. Rumors of their exploits had circulated for decades, small skirmishes blown out of proportion, victories achieved by improvisation, audacious raids executed where no sane officer would send a fleet. And yet, they were not supposed to be here. Malik ran a hand through his hair. If it's true, then we have a choice. We engage, or we continue to wait for a rescue that isn't coming. Kael'Ryn's fingers drummed on the command rail. We cannot engage, he said. Not unless we are prepared to die in the attempt. And I refuse to risk my men in a battle we cannot win. Silence stretched across the bridge. Even the hum of failing systems seemed to pause, as though the ship itself was holding its breath. Then we send a beacon, Tavos said finally, eyes sharp with a mix of fear and stubborn determination. A desperate signal. The humans may be reckless, yes, but they respond to need. Kael'Ryn turned, studying the engineer. Tavos' face was pale under the harsh lights, but his hands moved with deliberate confidence over the console. You would risk detection by enemy forces? He asked. Tavos shrugged. We are already detected. Any attempt to hide would be a lie. At least this way, if someone answers, it will be on our terms or theirs. Either path gives us a chance. Malik frowned. And if no one answers? Kael'Ryn exhaled slowly. Then we die knowing we did everything we could. The crew set to work. Tavos tapped into subspace relays, stripping the transmission down to its rawest essence. Each pulse was a call across the void, urgent, unpolished, begging for help from whoever might be listening. Kael'Ryn watched as his men labored under the unspoken weight of imminent failure. Every wire rerouted, every amplifier adjusted, was a gamble. One miscalculation, one misfired pulse, and the enemy could pinpoint their location with deadly precision. As the beacon launched, a faint hum resonated through the hull, a vibration that felt almost alive. The ship itself seemed to anticipate what was coming. Kael'Ryn allowed himself a brief thought of the humans, their unpredictable tactics, their legendary persistence, their disregard for protocol in favor of survival and aid. Stories claimed they had once rescued a fleet stranded in the edge of enemy space, moving through systems deemed entirely impassable. No one had expected them then, and no one expected them now. A soft alert drew Kael'Ryn's attention. Tactical displays flickered with movement, enemy scouts closing fast. Small, agile craft designed for harassment, perfect for a hit-and-run against a crippled cruiser. Shields at 40%, Tavos reported. Hull integrity unstable in Section 7. If they breach the aft corridor, we won't hold them off. Kael'Ryn's mind raced. The beacon had gone out, and now they waited, counting cycles that felt like lifetimes. The enemy would not slow, they would not hesitate. Prepare defensive protocols, Kael'Ryn ordered. Evasive maneuvers, weapons online, hull reinforced. We fight if we must. Malik's hand hovered near the comms. Do we have any hope of survival if they arrive before whoever it is responds? Kael'Ryn didn't answer immediately. He studied the shifting void, the faint interference patterns dancing across the sensors. Then he said, "Hope is not something we negotiate. It is something we act upon. If it arrives, we survive, because we can. If it does not, we survive, because we refuse to yield without a fight." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a series of pulses began echoing through the void, irregular and powerful. Tavos' console blinked rapidly. "Commander, that signature. It's moving faster than anything recorded in Coalition archives. FTL travel without a stabilized corridor. It's human. I don't know how they survive it, but they are here." Malik's eyes widened. "Here? Already?" Before Tavos could respond, the tactical display erupted with alerts, multiple enemy contacts converging on their position. Small ships, yes, but relentless, perfectly coordinated. The Veilthorn shuddered under the first impact of energy fire. The bridge lights flickered. Alarm screamed. Kael'Ryn gritted his teeth, gripping the command rail. "Stand fast," he ordered. "Hold your positions. We may be abandoned by the Coalition, but we are not abandoned by ourselves."
Not yet.
Outside, the void shifted violently, energy readings spiking far beyond what the crew had seen. Something immense was coming. Something that did not belong, and yet carried the unmistakable signature of life, intent, and power. Kael'Ryn's eyes narrowed. The humans had arrived, or they were about to, and the Veilthorn might live to see salvation. The void tore itself open with a scream of displaced light, an FTL rupture that left the Veilthorn trembling as if the universe itself had exhaled in fury. Then, through the distortion, it came, a warship like no Coalition vessel Kael'Ryn had ever seen. Its hull was jagged, asymmetric, scarred by battles that no archive recorded. Energy flares danced along its surface, overworked drives pulsing with controlled chaos. "Impossible," Tavos muttered, eyes wide at the sensor readouts. "They shouldn't be able to maintain structural integrity after." His words died as a volley of energy struck the nearest enemy skirmisher, vaporizing it in a flash that lit the void. Kael'Ryn's breath caught. The humans had arrived, and they were already fighting. Malik leaned over the console, voice tight with awe. "Those weapons, their fire pattern isn't coordinated by doctrine. It's instinct. Pure instinct." The human ship pivoted with a speed and brutality that defied Coalition predictions. It closed on the enemy scouts, its weapons spitting concentrated beams and high-velocity projectiles in a storm of destruction. Each strike tore apart the small crafts, leaving nothing but drifting debris. The humans advanced as though they expected no resistance, and when resistance came, they overpowered it without hesitation. "Captain," Tavos cried, pointing at the communications feed as a new signal pierced the static. A human voice, calm, precise, and commanding, filled the bridge. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the human warship Havoc. We read your distress signal. Stand down, or die in the attempt to resist us." Kael'Ryn's eyes widened. The voice carried authority not through volume, but through certainty. There was no negotiation in it, only the cold, unyielding logic of action. "Do they know the enemy is here?" Malak asked. "They know more than we do," Kael'Ryn said. "And that is enough." The Havoc did not wait. It executed a maneuver that tore it across 3 kilometers of vacuum in a heartbeat, striking the nearest cluster of enemy ships. Kinetic cannons roared. Plasma arcs lanced through void and metal alike. The impact threw the enemy into disarray, breaking formations that coalition strategists had predicted would hold. Kael'Ryn felt the bridge shake with every human strike. For the first time in cycles, a thrill he had thought extinct coursed through him. Hope, sharp and undeniable. Tavos adjusted sensors, trying to track every human action. "They're shields, they're taking punishment we couldn't survive. Yet they keep advancing. It's like they anticipate damage before it happens." Malak shook his head. "They fight as if the laws of physics are suggestions, not limitations." The enemy scrambled, attempting a retreat, but the humans were relentless. Small boarding pods fired from the Havoc, striking the Veilthorn's hull with precision and urgency. Human Marines, heavily armed, leapt onto the crippled cruiser, moving with lethal efficiency. They carried wounded crewmen through corridors under fire, their presence transforming despair into a frenzy of coordinated survival. Kael'Ryn finally allowed himself to speak aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're saving us." "Yes," Malak said, his usual cynicism stripped away by the sight of the humans in action. "They always do." One of the Marines, a tall man with a scar running from temple to jaw, turned to Kael'Ryn as he secured the bridge. "Keep your crew moving," he barked. "We get everyone out alive. Then we leave. No exceptions." Kael'Ryn nodded, understanding more in that moment than any coalition briefing could have taught him. These humans were not here because it was strategic. They were here because it was necessary, and because they would not fail. Outside, the enemy attempted one final coordinated strike, but the Havoc anticipated it. In a display of daring that defied calculation, the human ship executed a near-suicidal FTL hop, emerging inside the enemy formation. The resulting shockwave disintegrated the attackers in an instant. Coalition veterans watching from sensors would later describe it as reckless, and yet it worked. Kael'Ryn could not look away. Each maneuver, each calculated risk, each act of unflinching courage shattered every preconception he had about human limitations. They were unpredictable, yes. Chaotic, yes. But they were precise in their chaos, lethal in their compassion. As the last enemy ship was destroyed or scattered, silence fell over the void. The Veilthorn had survived, battered but intact. The humans had fulfilled the impossible, arriving where no one else dared, striking with overwhelming force, and rescuing those abandoned by doctrine and circumstance. Tavos exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I don't understand it," he admitted. "I've read every file, every record. Humans, they shouldn't be able to do this." Kael'Ryn placed a hand on the engineer's shoulder. "They operate under a different rule," he said quietly. "Where others see impossible, humans see necessity. Where others abandon hope, they answer it." Malak, still staring at the viewport, added softly, "And they do it without hesitation, without expectation of reward." Kael'Ryn allowed himself a small, rare smile. For the first time since the ambush, he felt the weight of despair lift, replaced by clarity. Humans did not fight because they were compelled by orders or politics. They fought because they refused to leave any ally behind. The Havoc hovered just beyond the Veilthorn's port hull, Marines organizing evacuation pods. Captain Ward's voice crackled through once more. "All personnel accounted for?
Good.
Prepare for extraction. We leave on my signal. Everyone stays alive, understood?" Kael'Ryn straightened, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Understood," he said aloud, more to himself than to anyone else. The enemy had been annihilated. The humans had arrived. and the Veilthorn and its survivors would live to see another day because of them. Yet in the calm that followed, Kael'Ryn knew the galaxy would have to reckon with a new reality. Humans answered calls no one else would, and their fury was as uncontainable as their loyalty. Outside, the stars stretched, unbroken, as the human warship readied to carry the Veilthorn's crew back into the safety of Coalition space. And somewhere in the void, Kael'Ryn realized the universe had just been reminded that where humans appeared, salvation often followed, whether anyone expected it or not. The Veilthorn groaned as it was gently tethered to the human warship, the Havoc, its bulk dwarfed yet cradled by the imposing alien architecture of human engineering. Kael'Ryn stood on the transport deck, observing the humans move with a fluid precision that blended brute strength and careful calculation. Every motion, every word, suggested a crew operating beyond discipline. They were instinct-guided by experience, a lethal harmony of improvisation and cohesion. "Stay close," barked a human sergeant, hauling a wounded alien soldier toward a medical pod. His voice carried authority but also calm urgency, the kind that imposed trust without demanding it. Kael'Ryn noted how his crew obeyed without question, their weariness replaced by relief and awe. Tavos approached, rubbing a hand over his face, still pale from the adrenaline of the fight. "I've run simulations on our sensors 100 times," he muttered, eyes flicking nervously toward the humans, "but nothing prepared me for them. They don't just survive impossible conditions, they thrive in them." Malak shook his head, lips pressed into a thin line. "I always thought human victories were exaggerated stories. Legends. Folklore." He gestured toward the medics as they loaded the last of the crew. "I was wrong. They don't exaggerate. They exist beyond expectation." Kael'Ryn allowed himself a slow breath. For the first time in cycles, the uncertainty, the fear, and the crushing weight of abandonment seemed to loosen. The humans had not only arrived, they had reshaped the meaning of survival. A voice interrupted his thoughts, crisp and direct. "Commander Kael'Ryn?" He turned to see the human captain, Elias Ward, stepping forward. The man's uniform was marked with scars from previous campaigns, the kind that spoke of both experience and danger. His eyes were steady, measuring, yet not without empathy. "I wanted to make sure your crew is stable. We don't leave anyone behind." Kael'Ryn inclined his head, unsure how to express gratitude fully. Words seemed insufficient. "You risked everything," he said finally. "For strangers." Ward's expression remained unflinching. "We do what needs to be done. You survived because you did what you could, and we survive because we refuse to let others fall. That's how humans operate. It's not bravery. It's necessity." Malak, overhearing, leaned closer. "Necessity." Ward's gaze swept over the remaining alien crew. "Humanity learned long ago that help rarely arrives when you expect it.
So we make it arrive.
When someone cannot save themselves, we answer. That's our rule. No exceptions." Kael'Ryn felt the words resonate deeper than any coalition doctrine.
They were not arbitrary.
They were a philosophy forged by countless struggles, by species whose evolution demanded resilience, audacity, and the refusal to yield. The Havoc's medics worked efficiently, checking vital signs, administering stabilizers, and offering reassurances in clipped, confident tones. Kael'Ryn observed Tavos receiving treatment for minor burns, his pride forbidding him to fully relax until a human hand guided him to a med station. Even in care, the human's presence was commanding, yet comforting. "Commander," Ward said again, gesturing toward the viewport, "we can take you home, but it won't be an easy transit. Enemy patrols will be hunting, and this system isn't forgiving." Kael'Ryn nodded. "We are ready to follow." "You will see," Ward said almost casually. "Humans don't wait for permission, and we don't leave those we can help. You'll learn soon enough that survival is about more than strategy. It's about choice. Choosing not to abandon others when everyone else would." As the humans prepared the jump to FTL, Kael'Ryn took a moment to observe his crew. Exhaustion still marked their features, but their expressions carried a spark he hadn't seen since before the ambush. Trust, renewed hope, and awe. They had witnessed a species that operated entirely outside the bounds of expectation, and in doing so, had been granted a second chance. Malak leaned on the railing beside him. "Do you think the Coalition understand them?" he asked quietly. Kael'Ryn shook his head. "They think they do, but they never will. They operate on logic, strategy, doctrine. Humans operate on necessity and survival. They see a problem, and they act, and somehow the universe bends to their will." The Havoc's engines began to pulse, warping space itself as the jump drive charged. Light twisted and stretched around the bridge viewport, the stars elongating into streaks. Kael'Ryn felt a rare sensation, both fear and exhilaration, as the familiar constraints of physics yielded to human ingenuity. "Hold on," Ward called. "We're leaving." The ship lurched, the universe folding around them in a violent, breathtaking motion. Kael'Ryn gripped the railing, his heart pounding, but the fear that had defined cycles of despair was gone, replaced by clarity. He knew now that where humans appeared, abandonment was impossible, and hope was tangible. When the jump light faded, the stars returned to their natural positions, calm and infinite. The Veilthorn was intact. The crew was alive. The humans had delivered what no Coalition doctrine could promise. Kael'Ryn finally allowed himself a small smile. "They are not reckless," he murmured to Tavos. "They are relentless because they choose not to fail when others have no expectation of help. That is what we witnessed." Malak, observing Ward issuing orders to his crew, nodded silently. "And now we know," he said. "The galaxy underestimated humans, and it will pay for every misjudgment." Kael'Ryn's gaze returned to the stars, stretching endlessly beyond the viewport. The humans had not only saved lives, they had rewritten the assumptions of survival, courage, and duty. And he, along with every soul aboard the Veilthorn, would carry that knowledge back into a galaxy that had once written them off as lost. As the Havoc set course for safer lanes, Kael'Ryn understood something profound. The humans would always come. When no one else answered, when hope seemed impossible, they would appear, not because it was convenient or strategic or sanctioned, but because they could not do otherwise. And in that certainty, the survivors found something no doctrine could teach, reassurance that even in the darkest void, salvation could howl from the stars, and it would bear the unmistakable mark of humanity.